So welcome back, Randy. We brought you back to Unison to talk about fire safety this time. You are originally from Montreal, but you're a Calgary kid at heart. You specifically spent 11 years as a stampeder, and you liked it so much you decided to stay and raise a family. So last time you were here, you threw your mother under the proverbial bus. Hi, Carla. About home and fire safety and fall prevention. This time, you're going to talk to us about outdoor fire safety and summer fire safety. So I'm going to let you go ahead and
Okay. I'll start by sharing my screen here and setting things up. So I just want to get my slideshow going. So if everyone can see that. So thanks for welcoming me back, Heather. I appreciate the opportunity to be here sharing with the folks listening in at Unison. It is a real pleasure of ours to have this opportunity to share both fire safety, fall prevention like we did last time. Today, a little bit about outdoor fire safety, and my colleague Alex will also be coming on with you to do some water safety around Calgary's waterways. And we really appreciate any opportunity we have to interact with the citizens in Calgary. And today I'll focus specifically on the crossover between our common fire causes and outdoor fire safety, because there is quite a crossover. Just before we begin, I'd like to talk about our fire department. We're established in 1885. We have 43 fire stations around Calgary, 1,400 frontline firefighters that work 365 days a week. Not all of them work 365. They're divided into 4 platoons, but the city is well protected 365 days a week, 24/7. Last year, we responded to 92,918 incidents. So 92,000, almost 93,000 times the alarm went off in the fire hall, and we had to go to answer the call. The type of incidents vary, but the majority, or just over half of the incidents we respond to, are critical medical interventions. A lot of those centered around people needing help at home, people needing help in the streets, people needing help in their workplaces. So any type of medical intervention, we're usually first to arrive on scene, assisting AHS either before they arrive or after they arrive. Fire and fire-related calls make up about 29% of our calls. And then you go on into the other types of calls we're called for, whether it's motor vehicle collisions, hazardous materials responses, or rescues, or even any of the severe weather responses. We haven't had any last year, but for those of you that recall the floods in 2013, we definitely were front and center in terms of response for those. This year and last year, we're experiencing drought conditions, so that will greatly affect what's going on in terms of fire behavior and fire safety prevention messaging. And when we do talk about fire safety, we always center our discussions around 3 key topics that I will be talking about today, which is prevention, detection, and evacuation. So starting with prevention, we want to talk about the top fire causes in Calgary, and this was dating back to 2021. But when we talk about the top fire causes that have sort of been the standard for the last number of years, number 1 has always been cooking, number 2, smoking, number 3, electrical, 4 being candles, and 5 being heating. So when we do a full hour-long presentation, we sort of get into the weeds in all these top fire causes. But for today, we'll center it around cooking and smoking, and also how those have an effect on outdoor fire safety. The reason we center around cooking is because cooking is the number 1 cause of fires in Calgary and in North America. On average, CFD responds to 2 cooking fires daily. So for our older adults living in and around Calgary, we want to share some safety messages that would keep them safe in the kitchen, would prevent those fires, and reduce the amount of cooking fires in the city. So the first one would be to never leave the cooking unattended. The number one reason fires start in kitchens is because of unattended cooking. Oftentimes people begin cooking or heating up oils. Even when we're talking about unattended cooking being a microwave or a toaster, leave the room and then forget that they're cooking, or something happens while they're out of the room. So we want to make sure that as much as possible, excuse me, that people remain in the kitchen when they're cooking. If they have to leave, we ask that they turn off the heating element or whatever device they're using, just to be safe. Wearing short and form-fitting sleeves will help prevent any burn or fire injuries while cooking. We oftentimes, when people are cooking, if they have long sleeves, they can burn if coming into contact with a pan or a pot. And then using oven mitts and pot handles when handling any hot objects. We want to make sure that people are safe from burns as well as preventing fires. When we talk about pans, if a pan of food catches fire, we want to slide a lid over it and turn off the burner. So I'll show a slide about that next. And then finally, don't cook if you are drowsy from any alcohol or medication. That's always a big one. We don't want people to kind of lose their bearings when they're cooking. But when we talk about grease fires and sliding the lid over, grease fires is a very dangerous type of fire that we can find in the kitchen. It results from grease or oils achieving a certain temperature, and then the mixture of that fuel, that heat, and the oxygen in the air will cause the oil in the pan to ignite. So we want to make sure people are safe, people are aware what to do. There are many misconceptions about what you should do. In our division, we want to focus on life safety. So making sure people are safe. If the flames and the fire is confined to the pot or the pan, we ask that you use an oven mitt, slide the lid or baking sheet over the fire to uh, um, basically suffocate the fire from oxygen, and then turn off the heat. One of the things we don't want to do is move a pan or pot after we've covered it and after we've turned on the heat. It needs quite a significant amount of time to cool down. We've seen situations where people covered the pan or the lid with the lid. They've turned off the heat and then immediately tried to move it because there was too much smoke or it smelled, and they wanted to get it outside to fresh air. And they either panicked and dropped it, and the fire resulted on the floor in the kitchen, or the handle melted and the pot fell over and the fire ignited immediately. So want to just make sure that we cover it by sliding either a pan or a lid, turn off the heat, and then get outside and call the fire department. That would be the protocol for a grease fire if it's contained within the pan. Obviously, if the fire is sputtering and it's gone outside and it's spreading, immediately leave the home. Don't try to put the fire out. Immediately leave the home, shut the doors behind you, and call the fire department. At that point, it becomes a very dangerous life situation. The other thing we want to warn against is pouring water on a grease fire. It is very dangerous. Some people, especially our friends that come over from different countries, a lot of new Canadians that we deal with, don't have experience with the same appliances like we have. Like many people, a stove is brand new to them. And so heating up oil and the grease fire is common. We want to make sure that they understand that water and oil don't mix. And in a grease fire situation, it could be devastating. So I'm going to show this quick video here. Hopefully it plays, just to show how dangerous water on a grease fire can be. So this is a video we filmed at the Calgary Fire Department's training center. We started a fire just by turning on the heating element and letting it heat. At a certain point, it started catching fire on its own. And then we used some water just to demonstrate what happens when water mixes with burning oil. So I'll press play here. And you can see as we pour the water on, it creates a huge fireball. And obviously, we did it from a distance, but if someone was standing nearby, there could be very, very dangerous potential for thermal injuries to the face, to the body, to the hands. So we want to make sure people are aware that water and grease don't mix. And we want to make sure that we don't pour any water on a grease fire. So in the kitchen, there are other types of devices that we want to be aware of. that could either start fires or cause thermal injuries, from kettles to toasters to microwaves, barbecues we'll talk about a little bit later, and even now the air fryers. Just making sure that we operate these devices away from things that can burn. When we're operating a toaster, pull it away from the curtains. And then just making sure we're handling hot things in such a way that we're not getting burned. I mentioned it before with microwaves. We want to make sure that we are aware of what we are heating up in the microwave. I have personally been to many fires where in senior centers where older adult friends were heating up a magic bag for either sore shoulders or leg, and they added an extra zero to the time. So instead of heating up, say, for 3 minutes, it became 30 minutes, but they forgot about it and started a fire in the microwave. So again, making sure you are present is one of the number one ways you can reduce those cooking fires or those thermal injuries. So that's the main point I had for this page. With toasters, if there is smoke coming from your toaster, make sure you unplug it. It's also safe practice to unplug all of these appliances when not using them. I know microwaves, they generally keep plugged in, but whether it's a kettle, a toaster, the air fryers, panini presses, anything with a heating element, it is best practice to unplug them and use only one single item in an outlet at a time. When we talk about smoking safety, that's another major cause of fires, and smoking is actually the number one cause of fire fatalities. So it's very important to talk about smoking. We want to make sure that if you smoke outdoors in a designated area. So don't smoke in your building. We tend to warn people away from smoking in their homes, not just our older adults, but anyone. We prefer if people smoked outdoors, putting out their cigarettes in a designated ashtray or a sturdy ashtray. Never put out your butts in planters or vegetation. And that gets to sort of that interface with the outdoor fire safety. It's very dangerous to put cigarette butts out in planters. Oftentimes it can smolder for days and even weeks at a time before a fire gets started. And the results can be devastating. In Calgary, obviously, with homes being so close to each other, that presents a significant danger, not just for your own home, but also for your neighbors. So make sure if you do any smoking outdoors, out on your deck, that you have a sturdy ashtray to put out your butts. And speaking of, you also want to make sure you wet your cigarette butts before disposal to ensure that they're out, and then you can throw them out. We always say never smoke in your bed or your comfy chair. Some people don't avoid smoking indoors, but if you're going to smoke indoors, please try to avoid a place where you would fall asleep. So, at night in bed, that's a huge cause of fire fatalities. Oftentimes, our older adult friends, after lunch sometimes, will watch TV in a comfy chair. We would like people to avoid smoking in those situations where they could fall asleep, if they're drowsy or whatnot. And then never smoke if using medical oxygen. The fire and oxygen are dangerous combinations. We did have a fatality a couple of years ago that involved a senior and an oxygen tank, and that was a very unfortunate situation. And really, we want to warn you not to smoke while using medical oxygen. That's a big one. Then we go to outdoor fire safety, and this is kind of where the smoking and the cooking kind of come together in Calgary. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the different fire safety messages. So we want to make sure that we keep any dried firewood, dried leaves, woody shrubs, construction materials, or propane tanks at least 1.5 meters from your home. That's a safe distance to ensure that, especially in these drought conditions, that we're keeping the home safe. Prune all tree branches within 2 meters from the ground. So really allow for some clearance, and then plant any new trees 3 meters apart, just to allow for that space. So that information comes to us from FireSmart Alberta FireSmart. And people can go to the website of Alberta FireSmart for more tips. They do a fantastic job of educating people, especially in the rural areas, about the wildfires. There's a huge concern for wildfires after what had gone on last summer, and then sort of what's already begun this spring. I know Calgarians are concerned, especially that those that live more on the outer outskirts of town or near any wooded areas. But these types of practices can help keep your home safe. So again, 1.5 meters is that safe distance to keep these combustible materials from your home. When we talk about outdoor barbecues and fire pits, which people use often in Calgary, we want to make sure that we maintain a 1 meter kid and pet free zone around those appliances, whether it's a barbecue or a fire pit, making sure that people keep a safe distance, and then maintain a 3 meter distance from your home and any combustible items in the yard. So we talked a little bit about that. So making sure there's space, and then also keeping away the fire pits or the grills from any overhanging vegetation, roofing or railing. That's super important. Sometimes people space it away, but they have so much vegetation that it could pose a danger. So we just want to make sure people are aware of those things. This again is from FireSmart Alberta, and just shows the sort of safe zones from your home. So keeping that intermediate or that immediate zone safe, 0 to 1.5 meters, where there should be no combustible materials, no dried vegetation. We talk about the propane tank, so keep them about 1.5 meters from the home, and then an intermediate zone where you could start planting smaller vegetation, and that's 1.5 to 10 meters. And then if you're lucky enough to have a yard big enough, you're looking at 10 to 30 meters to store any dried firewood or any larger trees and shrubs. So this was obviously more designed for some of those neighborhoods where people live closer to that rural or wildlife interface, but it definitely can apply within the city, even in terms of tidying up. When you do your spring cleaning, where to place the things around your home, raking up any dried leaves, collecting any dried shrubbery, and really when it comes to, we just finished the May long weekend and people are starting to plant, just kind of being aware of how to plant the vegetation, how to spread it out on your land. So again, that's Alberta Fire Smart. People can go look at that. It's a free resource. Anyone can take a look. They even have an online course that you can do, and that's Alberta Fire Smart to have a look. So then we move from prevention. We want to move into detection, and detection is basically talking about having working smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. Smoke alarms obviously protect you in the event of a fire, and carbon monoxide will prevent you from experiencing a carbon monoxide emergency, or at least warn you in the event of a carbon monoxide alert emergency. The main things to think about for both smoke and carbon monoxide alarms is to press the test button each month. So I have a smoke alarm here. I won't press the button, but every smoke alarm looks very similar, and carbon monoxide alarms a little different, but they all have a test button on them. We want you to press that test button once a month to ensure that they're working. There will be a sequence of beeps, 2 sets of 3 beeps for smoke alarms and 2 sets of 4 beeps for carbon monoxide alarms. So again, when we press those and they beep the way they're supposed to and according to your manufacturer's instructions, we ensure that they're working. The next thing we want to do is change the batteries in our alarms once a year. And this one requires a little bit of explanation because there are many different types of batteries. If your alarm, whether it's a smoke alarm or carbon monoxide alarm, has any form of replaceable battery, so whether it's AAA's, 9-volt batteries, whether it serves as the primary power source or a backup power source, we want you to replace those once a year. Some of the hardwired alarms, like you see in the picture here, have backup replaceable batteries. They should be replaced every year. And then the only ones that don't need replacing are alarms like the one I have in my hand. This one actually has a 10-year lithium ion battery, just like in the packaging that you can see here on the left. And these 10-year lithium ion batteries last the lifespan of the smoke alarm or the carbon monoxide alarm. And that brings us to the next slide, which is replacing our alarms every 10 years. Every alarm, whether it's a smoke alarm or a carbon monoxide alarm, needs to be replaced in 10 years. That's why, again, referencing the battery replacement slide, these new battery-powered alarms have the 10-year lithium ones so that when it's time to replace the battery and the alarm, you replace it all in one shot. So we want to make sure that you replace those alarms every 10 years. The older alarms had the manufacturing date posted in the back in very small print. So you would have to kind of look, put on your best glasses and check the date and then do the math 10 years from the date. So this one in my head is October 2017. So this one has another 3 years left of lifespan before it needs to be replaced. The newer alarms, if I can go back, the newer alarms have also a date on the side. So that's helping people that can just kind of take a look to see what the replace by date. Obviously, if you can't get up on the ladder when you do install your alarms, write down a note for yourself somewhere where you keep important papers that you need to replace your alarms by a certain date. Beyond that, if you have really yellow looking alarms up on your ceiling, that's a good indication that they need to be replaced. The Calgary Fire Department has a service where you could call us through 311 and we could come to test your smoke alarms and replace any replaceable batteries. We also have the ability to replace battery operated smoke alarms. If you have hardwired alarms that need replacing, you will have to call an electrician or a handyman service to do that because we're not able to do any wiring. But through the 311 system, if you need help looking or taking a look at your smoke alarms, well, our team, myself, Alex, our colleague Todd, and Gustavo can come out and take a look, test the batteries, and replace the alarms. So that's smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. The next final thing that we'll talk about is evacuation. Very simply put, we want to make sure that when those alarms ring, you know what to do, where to go, and who to call. So knowing what to do is, basically we want you to get out. And how to do that is you need to have a plan. You need to have a home escape plan that includes 2 ways out of every room in your home and a meeting spot where anyone in your home knows where to go. So it should be in front of the home. For those of you that live in a larger facility, there's often a muster point that you congregate on when you evacuate the premises. But in residential homes, we want to make sure you pick something that's in front of your home, like a tree or a mailbox or a lamppost, something that's stable, that won't move, and in front of the home, because when the fire department or emergency responders show up, you can give us more information about what's going on in the home. You should also have a plan to shelter in place if you cannot get out of your room. So making sure you keep the doors closed, making sure you put some clothes under the door to prevent any smoke from coming in, having any of your aids that you would need with you, including phone, medication, mobility devices, anything that you need so that in an emergency, if you can't get out, you can be in touch with first responders, making sure we know where you are at all times. So again, a home escape plan is a plan that you practice. We would like people to practice twice a year that has 2 ways out of every room and a home escape, a family meeting spot, as we call it. When we get out, I think I missed a slide, but there you go. We definitely want you to get out and stay out. Don't take time to look for belongings. Once you're out, do not try to go back in. Get to your meeting spot and wait for others to show up and the fire department as well. Please call 911 when you get out of the home. It's important to know your address. It's important to indicate the city. If you can indicate as well the phone number you're calling from in case you get disconnected, that's very important. They'll also ask you what the nature of the emergency is when you call. Finally, I want to thank you all for being part of this presentation. Thank you to Unison and Heather, especially for inviting us back. Always appreciate the opportunity to share with all of you. And hopefully there were some valuable things you've learned and some valuable resources you can go to. Obviously, I mentioned Alberta FireSmart for the wildfires, but you can also go to Calgary.ca/fire for any Calgary Fire Department information. And also our community safety page has a lot more fire safety tips that are a lot more in-depth than I could have gone into today. So very much appreciate it. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome. Now we've got some questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I think so. I hope so.
So What are the most common causes of residential fires during the summer?
Well, it still goes to those top fire causes with the cooking and the smoking, the electrical, not heating. That's why heating kind of drops off, but definitely cooking is still the number one cause.
Okay. And you talked about closing the doors.
Mhm.
Um, in the summertime, things are wide open. Do you take the time to close your windows and stuff, or do you just get out?
Well, you're not going to take time to close the windows in event of an emergency. We actually, and again, I appreciate that you asked that question now. One of the other things we talk about when we talk about prevention is making sure that when we go to bed at night, we close the doors. So it is good practice to close your doors in general, because that keeps the smoke out. And so when we talk about fire and the behavior of smoke, smoke will travel to any open areas of the home. Oftentimes, if we keep doors closed, one, it is a life-saving measure. So if your doors are closed and the smoke alarms go off in the middle of the night, keeping the smoke out will basically save your life. Will give you more time to react, more time to get out if you can get out, and obviously it will keep you safe if you have to shelter in place. It also prevents property damage. So oftentimes we've been to fires where the doors are closed. We're able to get to the seat of the fire, put it out, whether it's in the kitchen or in the living room. And oftentimes the damage is localized to the area because the doors were closed. So having those doors shut is very important. In an emergency, however, shut the doors behind you as you leave, but you won't have an opportunity, and we don't want you to take time to shut all the windows as you leave. It's really get out as quick as you can, closing doors behind you.
Okay. And let's talk about grilling safety especially with Calgary densifying and a lot more high density housing like condos and apartments and stuff like that. Um, People have barbecues and it's not 1.5 meters away and you've got a very limited space. So you cram in as many chairs as you can so you can have your friends out there with a beer. So how do you maybe set up your balcony so that it's as safe as it can be?
You obviously don't want to have it jam-packed with combustible materials, but also every building has their own bylaws in terms of what is allowed and what's not allowed. So you have to check with whether it's condo board or management company to see what is allowed. Certain buildings don't permit it. And unfortunately, the hard part is policing that, is knowing who's doing it in what buildings. We before we got on, we talked about the Millrise fire a few years ago, which basically took out the whole entire condo complex. And that started because of an outdoor grill that was not being used, was not, shouldn't have been used. And unfortunately it was. So definitely residents should be checking with their condo management boards. And if there are concerns, bring it up with them. And then obviously, if it needs to be escalated, they can always call us. We have safety codes officers that can come and take a look and make sure that things are okay.
And when you are using your barbecue,
Mhm.
my dad always made me turn off the propane first and then what is the proper way to turn off a propane barbecue or a gas barbecue?
Well, I think once you turn off or close the cylinder, you're cutting off the supply of propane. That's typically what I do. I turn off my propane cylinder and then I turn off the barbecue, and that cuts it out. But yeah, making sure that is turned off for sure is important.
Okay, awesome. What else do we have?
I was also going to say, on the note of the barbecues, making sure that at the start of the barbecue season, you check the grease trap underneath. A lot of grease collects. People tend to ignore it and forget about it. Over the winter time, it gets hard and people don't empty it out and they forget about it. So the grease trap is super important to take a look at. And as well, and I know many people are guilty of it. I've been guilty of it in the past as well, is when you're heating up your barbecue, you go back inside, you start preparing the rest of the meal. It's important not to leave the barbecue unattended as well, because you never know what could happen outside.
Okay, that's good. Um, if somebody's using like hot coals or they're doing the briquettes or what have you, What's the best way to, I mean, once you've lit it, you've used it, now what do you do? How do you?
My personal experience, I don't use those, but I know that some people use them when they're going camping and they use them, sort of in the some of the city parks. A lot is basically make sure that use lots of water to extinguish the fire. You should have water nearby if you are using that, just in case anything gets out of control. Just to extinguish, like you would do with cigarette butts. You want to make sure that they're properly extinguished before leaving the area.
Okay. And going back to cigarette butts, water or sand?
Sand can work. Water's safe as well. Not many people have sand lying around. Some people do. But yeah, water is safe. Putting the butts in a cup. I know some people use a tin can with water in it, and you put the butts in there before disposing of them.
Okay. Awesome. What else we got here? Um, if if a fire breaks out while you're grilling or you're having a bonfire, um, what's the best way to deal with that outside?
Well, definitely we want to start with the distancing of the fire, and the fire should be controlled. So I have some fire pit safety information, and we have that on our Calgary.ca /fire website. You want to make sure that that fire pit is built into the ground, and it doesn't exceed well, it says 0.75 meters in height, and this is Calgary bylaws. They should be 2 meters away from your property line, your house, garage, again, anything that can burn. They must not be under any trees. Again, so we talked about that before. Make sure there's no overhanging vegetation. And the fire itself must be kept to a minimum of 1 meter height. So we don't want people having large bonfires in the city. We don't want people throwing construction materials in the fire. We want to make sure that we're only burning those clean fuels. So we don't want to burn any wood that's been painted. We don't. I think I lost the.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay.
Stop sharing if you want.
Yeah. Okay. Well, stop sharing. Yeah. So we don't want to burn any wood that's been painted or treated. We don't want to burn any fresh cut wood, garbage, rubber, plastic, any furniture, yard waste. We don't want people burning these things in their homes. And again, we talk about having the water nearby. So you should have a water source. And that's why, most people don't, obviously people don't have a fire hose, and you can't pour a pool onto a big fire. So we want these fires controlled if they are happening in the city. We don't we don't want people not to enjoy the outdoors, but we need them to do it responsibly. So if we're getting to a situation where there's a bonfire that's out of control, we've probably circumvented many of these safeguards to get there. At that point, if we are there, we're calling 911, of course, and then the fire department will come and do our best to put it out. But really, when we talk about fire safety, whether it's in the home, out of the home, uh, many times it comes to common sense practices of the folks at home, because again, we're reactionary. The fire department, I mean, this is what we're doing now is obviously proactive to arm you with some information and some resources, but then it's really up to you who's listening to decide what to do that information, whether to use it or not. After that, the fire department is a reaction. You call the fire department when there's an emergency, and depending on what's going on, we have a 7 to 11 minute response time. But when it comes to fire doesn't wait for us. It doubles in size every 30 seconds, and we get there as quick as we can, and we do our best to save life and property. But it really is the onus. The onus is on homeowners and property owners and people living in the buildings to practice the proper behaviors to keep themselves, their loved ones, and their property safe.
So let's go back to, I think you said they needed to be in the ground.
Yeah.
For fire.
Ideally.
So what about the ones that you buy at Costco that are, they're up above, they can be shuffled around the space, and they've got like one of those mesh.
Yeah,
they're
they're built in. They're built in a screen, and those ones are acceptable as well. You want to make sure that you put them on top of something like a brick or stone so that they're not on top of a wooden deck. And because the heat can obviously start a fire. If the heat radiates in, it could start a
Usually
fire,
here when it's dry.
especially in dry conditions. So again, understanding that you want to make sure that you're not, you bought this nice fire pit at Costco, like you said, and you can burn some wood in it. It's all protected and closed, but you're burning it on a wooden deck or even a composite deck. It can melt and cause all sorts of problems. So
So a dryer drum in the backyard is probably not the best idea.
probably I'll advise, but we've seen those as well. We've seen people dig those into the ground and yeah, people have all sorts of ways to enjoy the summer. But again, it's really kind of taking inventory of your situation, your property, and then how you can do it safely.
Okay. Now fireworks are a big fat no-no in the city unless you have a
A
permit.
permit, and
And
that
it's
goes through our safety codes office, and they do not approve personal fireworks. Yeah, so huge no-no.
huge no-no.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what are the essentials to include in a home fire safety kit for the summer? So what should your home have? What should you kind of things that should you have around and handy?
Well, again, when we talk about fire around the home, it's really those proactive behaviors to clean the house up, to make sure there's no combustible materials, storing your propane tanks properly, making sure that they're not expired. Propane tanks expire as well. Obviously, if you're having a fire, we want to make sure you have water nearby. Whether it's like I said, whether it's a fire pit, you have wood, or if you're smoking outdoors, and just being sensible in terms of in the home. We talk about smoke alarms, making sure that they're working, checking the batteries, and then replacing them if they're expired, of course. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In the last one we did, we talked about fire extinguishers.
Mhm.
And you said it was good to have one in the home, but if things are going, don't grab a fire extinguisher, just run,
Yes.
get out.
So we prefer that people get out. Our number one priority is life safety. Obviously, we're going to do everything to protect your property, but when we talk to kids, when we talk to adults, we say, we can replace property, we can't replace people. Fire extinguishers, um, it's a nice to have. Many people aren't trained to use fire extinguishers. Fire extinguishers can help in small incipient fires. There have been cases where, let's say in a cooking fire, a fire extinguisher actually wound up spreading the fire. We don't know the numbers of how many times it spreads it versus puts it out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, because there's that little bit of uncertainty, we don't want people trying to figure out how to become firefighters in a moment of potential panic. Oftentimes, people's fire extinguishers, they bought it when they bought the home and it's been sitting there. Alex and I and Todd, we often go to homes where people hand us, fire extinguishers from 20, 30 years ago and asking
Yep.
us if it's still good. So with
That's a
that,
no.
with that all being said, we would prefer, obviously if it's a grease fire, like I said, contained within the pan and the person has the confidence to cover it and turn the heat off, great, then get out and call us. Same with an oven fire. If there's a fire in the oven, if you can, and the flames aren't, potentially dangerous to you, turn off the heat and get out. But yeah, we don't want people trying to put out the fire. We also get that same question about the fire blankets. And it seems like maybe they're being targeted towards seniors because we get lots of questions from seniors about them. Uh, Focus on the same principle as covering the fire with the lid or pan. The only worry about that, and they've been used around the world in Europe, especially. The only danger with that is anything that puts you closer to the fire, we're a little bit hesitant to, and we don't want to endorse any consumer products. We've also found that many of the fire blankets that are being marketed to people through social media aren't necessarily going through the same safety standards testing
Mhm.
that, let's say, a smoke alarm would or consumer electronics would be. So we don't fully endorse it. We know that in principle and in theory they work. But again, same with the fire extinguisher. We want to make sure that the priority is life safety in any fire situation.
Okay. So let's take everything that you just talked about, or for the home,
Mhm.
and talk about campfires.
Okay.
So perimeter
Yeah.
around your campfire.
That's about
like-
1.5 meters. You don't want to have a campfire, under any overhanging vegetation, close to any fire sources. We, um, we don't want to use any fire starter because that could be dangerous. I know some people like to bring a can of lighter fluid and use that, but that can also be dangerous with depending on the fumes and how they blow towards because the fumes themselves can be flammable and that can get on your clothes.
Oh, okay.
So we want to make sure people are starting it with paper and sort of the old-fashioned way,
Mm-hmm.
not the expedited way. Making sure we have water nearby, keeping children and pets 1 meter away from the fire, just to
And
make
your
sure.
wood pile
Yeah,
far
your
enough
wood
away.
pile. Well, we'll say about 3 meters away for the combustible materials, just to be safe, especially in these conditions. And the other thing is you need to check for local fire bans
Mhm.
with the conditions that we've been experiencing the last number of years. The fire bans are quite frequent in and around the province, and we definitely want to make sure. And I believe on Calgary.ca, there is, if you type in the fire bans in the search engine, it'll point you to the exact page. I wish I was smart enough to remember
That's
it on
okay.
the spot here.
We'll put those in the description.
Yeah, okay,
That's fine.
perfect.
And then bonfires on a beach. All right, like how do you make sure that the fire is out? No smoke, old coals, is it water so that it's just soupy?
Again, it would always be water. I'm not too familiar with the beach fires in Calgary. Not too many beaches that
They,
people are having fires
they
on, but
have handy sandy spots on the
yeah,
river.
yeah,
Maybe we'll
no,
talk to Alex about that.
absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, when we talk about using Calgary's parks, we want to make sure that any fires are used in the designated areas
Okay.
that are approved by the city. So we don't want people starting fires on the beach. We're experiencing a high number of um, encampment fires with our unhoused population. That's become a big issue for us to make sure that we respond to keep not only those folks safe, but Calgarians around. And so the less uncontrolled fires, the better. So we do want to advise people not starting fires in undesignated areas because again, that compounds the problems that we're finding in a lot of Calgary's green spaces in the treed areas, and I'm sure many people have seen. So it becomes quite a logistical nightmare for us when we are having fires reported in, like I said, these undesignated areas. So it's very important that, again, when we talk about common sense practices and Calgarians working together to keep not only their homes safe, but our community safe, it's understanding that, if it's not allowed, it's not allowed for a reason, not because we don't want people to have fun. We like to have fun as well, but we need some best practices to keep everyone safe.
Okay, and one last question about disposing of cigarette butts
Mhm.
or recreational stuff,
Yeah.
um, especially when you're driving.
Yep.
Looking out the window,
It's a big no.
it's a big fat no-no.
Yep.
Um, best way to deal with them in the car, just have a cup of water in your door or
Yeah, I fortunately don't smoke, and I grew up in an era where cars actually had cigarette
ashtrays.
ashtrays in the car. My dad was a smoker and it was full. Um, I I assume that would probably be the best practice to have a cup of water or like an old Coke can filled with water that you can put your cigarette butts in when you're done. We had a fire a couple of years ago at Nose Hill along 14th. And I believe the cause was a flicked cigarette butt or a Long John Laurie, I believe it was actually. And it was put out relatively quickly, but again, that becomes an issue. I actually have a story where my brother got burned in a car because someone flicked their butt out of a car ahead of him. And I guess with the draft and the wind,
sucked it in.
it sucked it into his car and he got it behind his back while he was driving. So it's also a dangerous situation, right? So yeah, again, best practice, respect, right? I was walking at Sandy Beach last year and I saw someone smoked their cigarette and threw it in, in the leaves and the mulch that's there. And it was like
Ooh.
one of these, come on, man, like you don't need to be a firefighter to be telling you that this is not a good idea. Right.
Yeah.
So hopefully people, understand that the severity of the weather conditions we have going on, not just in Calgary, but in Alberta, understanding the relationship we have with the area around us. And when it comes to fire safety, especially because people enjoy it, whether smoking or whether we talk about those fire pits, is just understanding that there is a level of responsibility that falls on the user to keep the city safe. Again, we can't just have an attitude that, oh, well, the fire department will take care of it, because oftentimes by the time we get there, it goes from a very little problem to a big problem. And so we need people to start using common sense, especially going into the summer months with the drought conditions
Mhm.
and the dry conditions that we'll be experiencing this year.
And just before we close this one off, how hard is it to put out a grass fire or a wildfire like on Nose Hill Park? Or, I mean, we're windy. Like, how hard is that? And how many people does that take?
Well, it just depends. We are trained as structural firefighters with, I guess, a functional level of wildland forestry. We're not wildland firefighters first. We get trained in wildland firefighting, but again, it would depend on the size and the severity. We have several, we call them bush buggies around town, that are trucks that carry water, that are specifically made for fighting fires sort of in the wild grasslands. But again, it just depends on the severity and the conditions, right? We're hoping that if there is a wildfire in, say, Nose Hill Park, it doesn't get out of hand. But yeah, it could be tricky. It could definitely be tricky depending on the conditions and the situation and the weather.
All right. So wherever you are, make sure that when you flick your ash, you do it in a very safe space. And when you dispose of your cigarette butts, uh, make sure they are disposed and not out your car window. Randy, thank you so much for coming and walking us through this. And hopefully you will not be busy this summer.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And again, for any resources, people can go to Calgary.ca /fire. There's a lot there. And if you have any other concerns that you need to speak to someone about, you can always call 311 and they'll direct you appropriately.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.